Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're exploring something absolutely fascinating, the clash of tongues, the evolution of early English. We're diving straight into the intense cultural collisions, the literal battles, and the brilliant literary minds that forged the very language you and I are using to communicate right now.
So think about it. How exactly did a clash of ancient invaders, monks, and French conquerors create this exact language we're speaking today? Well, I'll tell you right now, our language didn't just drop out of thin air, and it definitely wasn't some boring static evolution. Not at all. It's the result of centuries of pure survival. It's a wild synthesis of warring factions, a story of near-cultural blackout, and honestly, a miraculous comeback.
Section 1. Invaders shape a nation.
Okay, let's dive into this. Starting way back in 449 ED, we see the initial settlement of the Jutes, Saxons, and Angles in Britain. This was the physical invasion that planted our deep Germanic roots. Then we get these massive cultural shifts. In 597 AD, Christianity comes into Kent through St. Augustine. And shortly after, by 627 AD, it spreads right up into Northumbria. Fast forward a few centuries to 1066 AD, the famous Norman conquest, which brings the French language violently crashing onto the island. And finally, by 1362 AD, under King Edward III, English makes this triumphant return, officially mandated in the law courts. What this timeline brilliantly shows us is how physical invasions and religious conversions literally built the structural foundation of the nation over the course of nearly a millennium.
But here's a massive plot twist during King John's reign from 1199 to 1216. Look, we all know this era for the signing of the Magna Charta, right? But there was another huge event, the loss of the French possessions of the English crown. Now, losing territory usually sounds like a disaster, but in this case, it was a massive hidden blessing. It severed the cord with France and forced the native population and the invaders within Britain to finally weld together. They had no choice. They had to unite as one people under one crown.
Section 2. The English Language Wars.
Let's establish our starting baseline here. Anglo Saxon, or Old English, was that 5th century Germanic language brought over by those early invaders we talked about. This foundationally underpins modern English, but, and this is a big but, it sounded completely different. The crucial thing to understand is that it relied heavily on beginning rhyme, or alliteration. It didn't have those bouncy rhyming endings we're so used to in modern poetry. It was a hard, rhythmic, very consonant-heavy language.
And that set the stage for a dramatic conflict. On one side, you've got the Anglo Saxon Old English with its hard Germanic alliteration. And on the other side, Middle English, which was heavily influenced by Norman French, bringing in this mixed compound vocabulary and what we now call modern end rhyme. You literally had the raw, percussive sounds of the original settlers crashing headfirst into the softer, structured end rhyme poetry brought over by the Norman conquerors.
And you know, for a while, it looked like English was going to lose this war entirely. After the 1066 Norman conquest, English entered this brutal 50-year dark age, where written English almost completely vanished. The Norman French influence was so overpowering at the top levels of society that English was nearly wiped from the written record completely. It's the ultimate underdog narrative. The language only survived because it lived on in the mouths of the everyday common people.
So when English finally began to claw its way back out of the Stark Age, it wasn't unified at all. It had actually fractured into 3 fundamentally distinct provincial dialects, all competing for total dominance: Northern English, Midland English, and Southern English. Imagine 3 heavyweights stepping into a ring. Only one of them was going to become the standard. So who won? Well, the East Midland dialect achieved total victory, and it did so through a very precise strategic path. Step 1, it was the dialect spoken in the capital. Step 2, it was used in the powerful, influential learning centers of Oxford and Cambridge. And step 3, the absolute knockout punch, it was chosen by the great writer Chaucer for his literature. Those 3 factors combined to elevate the East Midland dialect into the standardized national language we recognize today.
Section 3. Epics, Faith, and Poetry.
You absolutely cannot talk about early English without talking about Beowulf. Fashioned right around the 8th century, it's essentially the ultimate medieval blockbuster. What makes it so fascinating, both linguistically and culturally, is that it's a heathen origin poem shaped by a later Christian author. It tells this wild story of the hero slaying the monster Grendel, then Grendel's mother, and ultimately dying to defeat a fiery dragon. It so brilliantly reflects that blending of raw, ancient heathen mythology with the newer Christian influences spreading across the land.
Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer output of the poet Cynewulf, who was also born in the 8th century. His own personal conversion, which happened via a vision of the cross, translated directly into his poem Dream of the Rood. Then you have Christ, dealing with the incarnation and last judgment, Eileen, covering the discovery of the true cross, and Juliana, which recounts Christian martyrdom. Cynewulf basically took his profound personal faith and turned it into these monumental Christian epics for the English people.
The variety of early English expression is truly staggering. We jump from Cadman's scriptural paraphrases covering Genesis, Exodus, and Daniel, preserved in a 10th century manuscript, to a complete shift in tone with the 937 Battle of Brunanburh. That was a piece of raw, martial war poetry, later translated by Tennyson. And then, jumping ahead to 1215, we see the Ormulum by a priest named Orm. This was a series of metrical homilies written entirely in short lines without any rhyme or alliteration at all. The language was just constantly experimenting. And all that experimentation led to the ultimate literary melting pot, Layamon's Brut, completed around 1205. Get this, it was written by a parish priest, and it is an enormous 30,000-line poem. Layamon just mashed together Celtic folklore, French influences, and English history, bringing us legendary characters like King Lear and Arthur. Stylistically, it's a brilliant bridge. He uses the old Anglo Saxon alliteration, but sprinkles in that newer French occasional rhyme. Shortly after that, right around 1220, we get the Owl and the Nightingale. It sounds so simple on the surface, basically a 13th century rap battle where two birds debate their merits. But linguistically, it is a massive pivot point. This poem famously discarded traditional alliteration almost entirely in favor of French end rhymes. This right here is the exact moment where the English effectively surrendered their ancient beginning rhyme and fully embraced the rhyming structures we recognize today. By the 14th century, the cultural blend was completely locked in. We see major works like Cursor Mundi, a legendary versified account of scripture and saints' lives, and Robert Manning's 1303 Handling Sin, or Manual of Sins. Interestingly enough, Handling Sin was translated directly from French, which really demonstrates how deeply embedded French translation had become in guiding English moral and religious literature by the 1300s.
Section 4. Pioneers of English Prose. A totally crucial figure here is the Venerable Bede, who wrote the ecclesiastical history at Jarrow in Northumbria. He wrote it in Latin between 673 and 735. But the real game changer is what happened next. In the 9th century, King Alfred the Great, deliberately translated Bede's Latin history into the vernacular English language. We should really celebrate King Alfred not just as a monarch, but as a literary champion who fought for his people to be able to read and understand their own origins in their very own tongue. English prose also became the primary tool for intimate personal instruction. For example, we have the Encrene Rivle from around 1225, which was a devotional prose treatise specifically written to guide three ladies entering a religious life. Later on, in 1340, the Aenbite of Inwit, or Remorse of Conscience, was published, once again translated from French. These pieces prove that English prose was finally becoming robust enough to handle really complex ideas of conscience, morality, and daily instruction. And that brings us to the greatest monument of Old English prose, the Anglo Saxon Chronicle. Guided by King Alfred, this national history was continuously updated, literally capturing the evolving heartbeat of the nation, until it finally closed in 1154. Think about the incredible journey we've just covered today, from the swords of the Jutes and Saxons, plunging through the dark age of the Norman conquest, all the way to Chaucer and standardization. But language never stops moving. So based on this incredible history of collisions and adaptations, what modern forces do you think are shaping the English we're going to speak tomorrow? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.